Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show on News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. Phone lines are open 770-5790 1-800-687-0790. The KFYO text line always open at 806-680-2790. Later on this morning at 10:35, U.S. Senator John Cornyn will join me on the show. Got quite a bit to get into with the senator. At 10:48 or so, right around 10:48, we'll visit with Sky Straightener out at SS Outfitters. Right now, we head to the phones, and joining us this morning, Congressman Jodey Arrington. Welcome back, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Chad. I'm doing great, as always. When I'm in West Texas, I'm down in the big country in Abilene and was in Sweetwater yesterday, and just invigorating to be out among my people. And I would not want to be John Cornyn answering for the performance of the Senate this morning. So I'm excited and happy to talk to you about what's going on the House side and also what's happening out here in the district. So thanks for letting me be on the show with you.
Absolutely, anytime. Well, let's start off with talking about during the recess. I know you haven't been kicking back and relaxing and going on vacation. You've been traveling the district and talking to a lot of different groups. What are you hearing from the different groups that you're talking to, the different roundtables that you've had? Are they expressing frustration? Are you talking about ag-related issues? What all's been going on?
Well, it's a list of things. I'd say the top of the list is frustration, especially from conservatives, that the Senate can't function and pass the health care bill. We're one vote short. I would take a vote every week until we did pass it, because we've got to flip that one. So much is at stake, as you know, the momentum for our president, our conservative agenda, but real and bold tax reform. And as they understand that, and so they just can't fathom how Republicans have unified leadership, which we begged the American people for, and we're right now, squandering it. I do have hope that will change, and I hope that Senator Cornyn will talk about that. But that's at the top of the list because they know that's a big deal. They don't appreciate, because the national media would have you believe that nothing's happening, but we've had 4 major pieces of legislation pass the House and Senate, and the president has signed them into law with respect to improving our services to our veterans, and whether it's the GI Bill or more accountability or more choice on the health care side. So that's always encouraging to them and is buried somewhere, in the stories about Charlottesville or tearing down monuments or whatever the case may be. And I think with agriculture being the lifeblood of the economy and with the Farm Bill being opened, I spend a lot of time talking to the ag community, and there's a lot of fear out there that if we don't get cotton back in, if we don't get a good, strong, reliable Farm Bill, it will fundamentally change the landscape economically of West Texas. So I've got to keep my eye on the ball there, and so that's the beginning of a long list of things that are on the hearts and minds of the folks that live out here in West Texas.
The president signed a veterans bill yesterday that you were a co-sponsor of, correct?
That's correct. The VA Appeal Improvement and Modernization Act, again, among the cloud of disappointment, there's a silver lining. We've got 4 major bipartisan pieces of legislation. Recently, the GI Bill, which is just one component of the GI Bill that the president signed a couple weeks ago, is that, you typically need to have to be activated for 36 months to receive full GI benefits. But if you're a Purple Heart recipient, you shouldn't have to wait 36 months. You take a bullet for this country, you get the full benefits. And that was one of the reforms in there. This appeal improvement is just another symptom of bureaucratic dysfunction at the VA, where you have over 500,000 cases in the rears in terms of disability and other veterans benefit services. So we've just streamlined the process. On top of that, put accountability, and I think that should improve it, but we're going to be watching. There's no one fix to anything, but I'm proud of what we've been able to do, and I'm grateful to Chairman Rowe for letting me be a chair of the subcommittee, which allows West Texas and our values to be, I think, brought to bear more predominantly as in my role as chair of that subcommittee.
We're visiting with Congressman Jodey Arrington. You mentioned earlier that you had been speaking, obviously, to a lot of the ag community. One of the questions I have for you is about NAFTA. And the president has, and you, as you know, during the campaign, the president wasn't happy about NAFTA. He said that he wanted to renegotiate the deal, to renegotiate NAFTA to make it better for the United States. Now the president, in at least a few times, has said, maybe we'll just tear it up. Maybe we'll just tear it up and end NAFTA altogether. Is that something that ag producers out here are talking to you about? Is that something that they are concerned about, dislike, and how do you feel about it?
It's a great question and very relevant. I'm speaking to the Cattle Beef Association folks today here in Abilene, and obviously that's a big part of our economy as well. Texas leads the nation in cattle production. I love this president, and for all the reasons why we voted for him to turn this culture in Washington upside down. But there are some things that I think make people nervous, and I can appreciate why they do. I think he's used to negotiating in the private sector, and I think he's been very successful, probably will be our most successful chief negotiator for our country. But you've got our largest export market in Mexico for agriculture, almost $1 billion, and I would say that you've got to be real careful that you don't scare our biggest and best partner and friend when it comes to exporting U.S. ag products. I think in the end, we'll come up with something improved in terms of NAFTA. But NAFTA is probably broken for some manufacturing, some niches in agriculture production. But for cotton, it works really well. For corn and wheat and cattle, it works really well. So you also want to go in with the first do no harm mentality. So I believe the final outcome will be good. Look, he helped open a market in China, which is the largest market in the world, that has been closed for over 13, 14 years. And now we've had our first U.S. beef that has been exported recently through the Sam's Corporation back in June. That's huge because that's a 1.2 billion people market. And I think in the end, the president's going to do everything he can to put us in a position to win. He's not going to do something to hurt us. This is just how he negotiates. And, I'm engaged in the process too, and as a member of the Ag Committee, so I'm confident in the outcome will be good. We just have to be careful and be responsible how we negotiate.
Can you hold on for one more segment, or do you have to get going?
Yeah.
Okay.
No. I'm as long as you need me.
Great. We'll go ahead. We'll take the break. Congressman, we'll put you on hold, and when we come back, we'll continue our discussion with Congressman Jodey Arrington here on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, KFYO. All right, welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, 95.1 FM, 790 AM, KFYO. Broadcasting from the Culligan Water Studios, better water, pure and simple. Joining us on the phones this morning, Congressman Jodey Arrington. Congressman, welcome back. Thank you again for holding through that break. I want to bring up something that not only the president has spoken about, but also the speaker has spoken about. The president, during a rally the other day, mentioned, hey, maybe in order to get funding for the border wall, he opened the possibility of shutting down the government. Speaker Paul Ryan was not a fan of that. He said nobody wants to see that. I don't know. Maybe the president does want to see it if he doesn't get funding for the border wall. Where would you stand on that? If the president doesn't get his funding for a border wall and is ready to shut down the government, how would you feel about that?
Well, first I'd say we voted on I'll call a minibus security funding package, which included $10 billion in funding for physical barriers, that is walls, fences, but also has technology. It has more Border Patrol agents. To me, border security is a comprehensive strategy. It's not one thing, but I do support putting walls, fences, and other physical barriers where they make sense. And so I support the president on that. But I also think that you can't take shutting the government off the table. I'm not one that says, in no case will I ever consider shutting the government down. I think it needs to be a high threshold, Chad, because it can cost taxpayers more money. It also tends to not work out very well for the Republicans or the party that's in power that's forcing that. We tend to lose politically. But I think that in some cases it's the right thing to do. And as I've said before, I mean, there's some parts of the government I'd shut down and never turn back on. You wouldn't shut down national security. You wouldn't shut down things that have to do with public safety. But so, yeah, I mean, I would keep that option on the table, but not just for issues of national security, which I think border security is, but also for our national debt, which I think is the biggest threat to our national security. And until we have something that looks more like the budget we just passed, now we just passed it out of the committee, where you cut $200 billion from mandatory spending and start to get serious about reining in the spending and balancing our budget and reducing our national debt. I mean, that to me is the biggest outrage of all, that we just continue to drive the debt down and mortgage the future for our children and spend their inheritance on our wants, not needs. So anyway, my point is I would keep that option on the table, but it would need to be a high threshold. I don't think it's the ideal situation, but I would keep it out there as an option.
But does border wall funding meet that high threshold?
Well, like I said, we voted on $10 billion, and I think you're going to have money that goes to border security, which includes border wall, fences. If you're talking about a border wall from end to end, 2,000 miles, I don't think that's an issue of shutting down shutting down the government. But I don't even think that's Trump's position.
Right.
I think if we've got substantial funding to get at the strategic places that the Border Patrol agents and other experts are saying we need physical barriers, I think he'd be delighted. I think this is his starting position. I get it. I've seen him negotiate before over the last several months, and I'm comfortable with that at this point.
Did you hear the president's speech on Afghanistan, and what were your thoughts on this new, I guess, direction that the president's going to take the war in Afghanistan, America's longest war right now?
It's about time. That's my short answer. All throughout the campaign, I have said that we've got to quit politicizing these conflicts and these threats. We saw that in spades with Barack Obama, President Obama. You know, he withdrew troops in Iraq for purely political purposes, and we saw ISIS fill the void. He called them the JV and didn't take that threat seriously, and now we've got a real problem on our hands. But this president's taking that seriously and addressing that. We're seeing where we're making headway now. Same thing with drawing the arbitrary line, which created Vladimir Putin and their alliance with Assad. So we've got to engage, we've got to equip and empower the generals and the commanders on the ground to do their job. So they need rules of engagement that don't hamstring them, and we need clear objectives, and we don't need arbitrary timelines either. We need condition-based objectives. We give them all they need to go win, and achieve the objectives. And that is the approach that I understand the president taking. I agree with him 100% and support him 100%. And this is a guy, Chad, that's been very reluctant to get involved and to stay involved in that part of the world. But as he said, when you sit behind the Oval Office, when you sit behind that desk in the Oval Office, things look differently. When you get your national security briefings, things change. And he's the commander-in-chief now, and he's got great advisors in Mattis and Kelly and other generals. So I think it's a great sign of leadership that he's listening to the generals, and it's about time that our commander-in-chief does that.
I want to read a quote to you. This is coming from Politico this morning. The headline is Trump attacks McConnell and Ryan over debt ceiling. The president, I don't know if this was a tweet or if the president said this, but he said, quote, I requested that Mitch M. and Paul R. Tie the debt ceiling legislation to popular VA bill, which just passed for easy approval. Okay, he tweeted this. They didn't do it, so now we have a big deal with Dems holding them up as usual on debt ceiling approval. Could have been easy. Now it's a mess. So the president kind of throwing Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell under the bus, saying that this whole debt ceiling deal is going to be a mess now because of them. One, what is your response to that? And two, is the president, Mitch McConnell, there's the story that came out that Mitch McConnell said the president's going to have trouble saving his presidency. The president and Mitch McConnell are having some fights. The president and the speaker don't always agree with each other. Is the president in danger of running out of friends in Washington, D.C., and does that matter?
I think the president, like myself and most Americans, are very frustrated with the Senate. I think he deals with Speaker Ryan more collegially. And so when you've done everything to work in partnership with and cajole, then it becomes, what's your other option to get the Senate to actually move on things that matter, like health care reform. I think when you've reached the end of your rope and you've used every tool in the tool belt diplomatically, then I don't think you have any other choice. And, we're hearing from the American people, I'm sure he is, I am in the district, why can't you guys get your act together and get this health care bill passed and do what you said you were going to do for the last 7 years, and let's get this train running at full speed in terms of our conservative agenda. So I think with respect to McConnell, that's where he finds himself. And it's kind of like, here's the last-ditch effort, and he knows that his legacy and his performance and ability to achieve all the things that he's promised hinge on McConnell moving the ball there in the Senate, which I know is more difficult than the House. I recognize that, but I'm not. That's kind of how I see things.
Do you think? And again, the House did their job on Obamacare, and was it perfect? No, but you got something done. The House got something done on repealing and replacing Obamacare. Do you think there's still any chance that something can be done this year on Obamacare?
Absolutely, and John Cornyn's a friend, and but he's the number 2 in the Senate. These guys, they need to keep voting on this. They need to get with McCain. As frustrated as I am with John McCain right now, let's work out the solution to flip him. We've got one stinking vote to get this thing to the president and deliver and get that momentum that we need. So, no, we shouldn't give up, Chad.
Good.
You saw us in the House run up for a vote, and then we had to pull it back, and then we came back and we passed it. So don't give up. This is too important to America and too important to our conservative agenda.
Congressman, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chad. God bless.
Have a good one.